Hello, this is Domenico with Easynomics, and we're going to look at positive externalities. We're going to look specifically at production, and we're going to use the applied example of education, the production of education services. Basically, private and public schooling, we're producing a service, education, which then has a spillover benefit to society. One illustration to highlight the social benefits exceeding the social costs of the production of education services is looking at the correlation between the mean years of schooling and GDP per capita. Here we see on the x-axis we're measuring the mean years of schooling, while on the y-axis here we're looking at GDP per capita. And a little bit more detail, mean years of schooling for those age 15 and above, and GDP per capita in inflation-adjusted international dollars. And we can see that there is a strong correlation between rising per capita income, GDP per capita income, and the increasing number of years of schooling, which makes sense. The more schooling or education that individuals in a society gain, the more skilled they are, and the more skilled, the higher skilled they are, the more productive they are to their economy, and thus contributing to GDP for their economy. So we can highlight that the production of education services has that spillover benefit of increasing the skill sets of the population, and also other benefits such as people using their critical thinking skills to perhaps vote for the most qualified candidate in an election, and so on, and those decisions will spill over and benefit the rest of society. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and illustrate a positive externality of production, looking at the market for education. This can be said also for the production of healthcare services. We can also use this for research and development on new technologies that could spill over and benefit society. So, some other examples that can be used of a positive production externality, like I said, health services, the provision of health services, research and development, which leads to new technologies that can spill over and benefit society, and so on. But we're going to use the example of education. Okay? So we're measuring the price of education, the quantity of education, and we're going to look at the free market first. So here we have the supply of private education. We'll label that S1, which is equal to the marginal private costs of private education. And then we have our downward sloping demand curve for education, where D1 equals the marginal private benefit of the household consuming education. And that will create the equilibrium, or the free market equilibrium price for private education at PM, and the equilibrium quantity of education at QM. And this is private education, right? The government is not intervening. It is a free market. And as a result of the free market providing education, it will be private firms providing that private education. Okay? Now, society sees that the benefits, the social benefits of gaining education is exceeding the social costs. So this would mean that society would like more education provided than what is being provided in the free market. So the free market has failed to provide enough education to satisfy the needs and wants of society. And we can illustrate that by highlighting that the social optimum level of education is represented by S2, which is further out. So here is S2, highlighting that society would like more education provided. So S2 equals the marginal social cost. So there we can see the welfare loss, right? The intersection at point A, when we look at point B, we notice that at the free market quantity of QM, that the marginal, and we're gonna add this, we gotta add You can see that point A here, the marginal social benefit of education is exceeding, here we're touching the social cost, the marginal social cost. So again, at QM, the marginal social benefits of education is exceeding the marginal social cost. So that means that there is an under allocation. The free market is providing less education services than what is desired by society. Society would like more. And that would create the welfare loss, which is this triangular area here. The social optimum would then be achieved where MSC equals MSB at point C. All right, society would like more education provided. The optimal would be right here. And we can highlight how that intersection generates an optimal price for education at P-opt, price optimum, and an optimal quantity at Q-opt. Okay, essentially we're done illustrating a positive externality of production. We can highlight the welfare loss here. This triangular area represents the underallocation. And also one technique that you can use to ensure that you've identified the welfare loss correctly is that with positive externalities of production, it's kind of like an arrow. You can see this line looking like an arrow, meaning that we want more, society wants more. With a negative externality graph, you'd see the arrow pointing in the opposite direction, where that we would want less. Okay? So let's go ahead and analyze this as we would for a paper exam. And as we do, we can make a few notes. So we have graph A illustrating the market for education, education being a positive externality of production. We're measuring the price of education on the y-axis, the quantity, supply, and demand of education on the x-axis. We have a downward sloping demand curve labeled D1, which is equal to our marginal private benefit, and which is also equal to the marginal social benefit. We're assuming that the household, we're assuming that with the household, the consumption, the private and social benefits are equal to each other. We have an upward sloping supply curve according to the law of supply labeled S1, which is equal to the marginal private cost of education. And we're going to look at the free market first. There is no government intervention yet. So in the free market, we see that where the marginal private costs of private education is equal to the marginal private benefit of education, at point A, it provides a price for private education at PM within the free market and a quantity supply and demanded for private education at QM, right? So where MPC equals MPB provides the equilibrium price for private education at PM and equilibrium quantity for education at QM. But then we notice that at QM, the marginal social benefit of education is greater than the marginal social cost, right? At point A, MSB is greater than MSC. This signifies that there is an under allocation of resources to the production and consumption of education versus what is desired by society. Society would like more education provided. So the free market has failed. Social optimum would then be achieved where marginal social cost is equal to marginal social benefit. That would be the allocatively efficient level of output. That would provide the optimal price at P-opt and the optimal quantity at Q-opt. Okay? So there is our first model. In the next series of videos, we'll look at how do we solve this? How does the government intervene and provide the optimal quantity, the optimal social quantity? If you have any questions, feel free to comment and don't forget to subscribe and to like.